This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I haven't had Jake Burns on here in a minute, and because of that, I have a number of things that I really would love to talk to Jake Burns about. So to do that, of course, I would have to get Jake Burns to agree to come on the show. And thank you, Jake, for coming on the show today to discuss these things with me, because there is a lot to discuss about. This is one of the most interesting Browns teams, I think. I mean, like, if we're talking about since reactivation, there's been nothing close to this. Yeah, you would have to probably go somewhere before my time to find a team more interesting than this one and more resilient than this one. Just straight off the back here, Jake, I have an opinion that the Browns being 8-5 at this point, given that they have dealt with this much, says a lot about where they've been and what they've been able to accomplish over the last 4 years, more than anything. What do you think? This is just, hey, they got a couple things go the right way and that's why they're 8-5, or do you think this is kind of more of a reflection on the Browns as a program?
Well, I mean, I think that there's the way I've kind of tried to frame this, from my perspective at least, is it's clear that the guys who have been the core parts of this for Kevin's run, and even before Kevin's run, are becoming the veterans. And, you know, it doesn't take much looking deeper than, just the respect Myles Garrett has around the league. I think that the mic'd up session with the Jags that they posted yesterday gives you an example of that. Like, these are no longer the young guys. They're no longer, even though they're sort of a young team by data, I think they've got a lot of the important pieces, are veterans that have seen a lot of football, seen a lot of scenarios in the NFL now. So I think that it does speak, at least in my opinion, to a culture change. I think that, some of these things, in my opinion, are games that you can't necessarily control. The thing that helps between a win and a loss, like the one or two plays, are sort of coin flippy at times. A missed field goal or something like that, and maybe your guys like look at Dustin Hopkins' kick that he makes, the field goal that he makes in Sunday's game, where it's like hanging on the right goalpost and then just somehow sort of curls in. My general point is that I think that there is a level of leadership that is higher than we've seen here in a while. And I think that Kevin has stayed the right path with a lot of his messaging, a lot of his belief system, and the guys have gotten older and they've gotten the results, right? Like, you hear people talk about process versus results. And I think that that's always a fun conversation to have. But in the NFL, your process can be great, but the results don't always follow. But sometimes you need those results to show your guys that this is what it takes to win. And we have the ability to win these types of games. And I think they've seen that this year. So my theory has sort of been, Quincy, that this is quite clearly not a Super Bowl team, and it's not their fault, right? The old Good Will Hunting. It's not your fault, right? It's not their fault that these injuries have happened. It is just the byproduct of luck in the NFL year over year, where you look. I mean, it doesn't need any further investigation than what's going on with the Bears, the team they're playing this week, who have like 4 names on the injury report. The Browns have 17. They have 1 name on the IR, where the Browns are pushing double digits now. So you can't always control certain aspects, injuries or some of them. But I think if we believe this team can be a Super Bowl contender, which they would have this year if they stayed healthy, or into next year, the year after, if they do make that really serious run, AFC Championship, potential Super Bowl trip down the line, like, I think that we will look back at 2023, and I think the guys maybe will look back when they're asked this question of, when did the attitude, the belief, the culture change? And I think this is a year where they're proving that they can do anything that's even the most impossible task, right? Beating the 49ers, some of these things where they're 3-1 against division leaders. Like, they're establishing a belief in the process, and the results are following their belief in the process, because you'll hear a lot of the guys echo Kevin's 1-0 this week sentiment, right? Nothing matters more than this week. Like, there's a united belief in the theory the head coach is bringing, and the guys are living a week by week life and proving that this can work for them. So I do think that 23 after the frustrations of 22 and 21 have a chance as we look back to be like, this is where the core of this group came together, and this is where we started to believe that no matter what the odds were, we could overcome them and we could win. And I think that that's why 23 is already a great success to me. And I think we're going to talk about this a little more in a few moments, but we're getting to the point where it's like the margin for error is, next man up is only so good until it's no man's left, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's no matter what here, Quincy, I'm sure you would agree with me based on how you hear these guys talk and really how they play is they don't care much about that. They just keep going out and fighting the good fight, man.
Yeah, man. If they cared about that, they would have been gone a long time ago, right? Like we we would have been talking about a team that would have thrown in the white flag, a long time ago, right? And that's the thing with this. There's two ways to view this, right? There's a way to view it and be, hey, it stinks. We bad luck, Cleveland. What could have been, if we could have been healthy, which is true. There's also a way to view it. It's like, hey, man, now it's found money. Right? Like now it's like nobody really expects you to do anything. If the Browns lose out for the rest of the season, which I don't think they'll do, but if they do, nobody's going to be like, oh man, somebody needs to be fired. Nobody
Somebody
reasonable.
will.
Yeah,
Somebody will. Yes,
we
there's the
all
caveat.
know. We all
Yeah.
know. Jimmy 585557222 Browns guy is gonna be in your mentions talking about how it's Kevin's fault that the team's on injured reserve because of time of possession. That's a new one I heard.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I've
Yep.
heard them all, but nobody reasonable, and hopefully nobody who makes that decision is gonna be on that side of that argument, because that's just where they are. And I think it can kind of be freeing when you're playing with that energy, where it's like, hey, if we make a mistake, it is what it is. We can just kind of bounce back from it and see what happens. So I know that the injuries this week, it hit you all in a wave, but I really don't think it's going to be something where the team's going to come out super lackadaisical because of it. Again, if they could come back after hearing the quarterback's out for the year, watching one of the most devastating injuries of the year happen to one of their best players on the team, then this is probably a unit that's going to play well and still got Miles, right?
Yeah. No, like I think the way that I'm looking at it is a little bit of what you're saying there, which is I'm appreciating what they're doing, and I think that we should all be appreciating what they're doing and kind of live more, in that moment of like, stop trying to make sense of this, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to make sense to you on paper, but they're doing it, they're fighting, and we should be appreciative of like being on the right side of NFL randomness, because I think we've been on the wrong side of NFL randomness with this organization for so long that it can be hard to accept that you're on the right side of it and step in and enjoy it, because sometimes all you want to do is live in the negativity of, oh, this guy's hurt, that guy's hurt. And it's been a tough week of injuries. I'm sure we would all agree with that. Was seeing, Delpit and Mo Hurst and Okoronkwo and these guys get hurt, but they clearly have the idea that we can have the next guy on the roster step up and fill the shoes. They are pushing the threshold here, though. I think we could all live in a world where we appreciate and understand the effort and the belief that they have, but at some point it becomes too much. Now, I like you think that there's a path to 10, 11 wins here. I still think they can do that. But what I am trying to, at least on my podcast, trying to talk to people about is the perspective of what still makes a successful season. To me,
Mm-hmm.
if they lose these last four, it's still a successful season. I think they've done a bunch of great things, forming the right habits that will carry them in the future. But I would say, like, the margin for error continues to shrink for these guys. It's like, you'll have this question of how do they overcome, or what's the difference between the starter and Ronnie Hickman? Well, the you can't, I'm not trying to tell you how to fan here because I'm trying to be careful with that, but like, you have to understand that the window of mistake is wider as you go further down the depth
Mm-hmm.
chart. So getting mad at James Hudson constantly is like, this is who he is. He's not a start. They wouldn't be willingly putting him out there because there are better options, but they're 4 tackles deep an injured reserve. So they're bringing guys in here that are just they're wider margin for error guys. So I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to get mad about Jerron Christian not being able to handle certain aspects of the game, right? Or if you're not talking about a depth issue up front, they don't have if Dalvin Tomlinson's too tired, late in the game, or if whatever aspect you get mad at backup quarterbacks, like I want them to win. They're trying to win. They're doing everything they can, but you have to understand the further you move down the line of guys who your frontline players, the margin for error opportunity just gets wider and wider. And eventually there are going to be things that you are used to seeing your football team do well that they're just not as good at anymore because the team has shifted away from who's been out there so often. So I think that where the framework for me comes is like, well, I think that the way I expect them to win 10 games. I expect them to get there, but I also won't be frustrated, like upset or bothered if they can't, because there's been so much movement of things, quality players that have been taken off the board for them. So
Mm-hmm.
the pieces are still there. They have enough. They have Denzel. They have Miles. They've got enough. I think Joe's playing well. They have enough to still get where we think that they can go, but I also am understanding that it does as the NFL is really challenging and that margin for error shrinks and condenses week over week with these injuries. There are going to be moments that it just is too much for them to overcome. We saw that the Rams, we saw that with the Broncos at times. Those things happen. So I would frame it to folks as like you mentioned earlier, Quincy, like enjoy the ride. The expectation should be low. And if they pull this off, you should try your best to never forget what they were able to do here, right? But if they can't understand, I'm trying to understand or paint the picture of understanding of why. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
lot. They're dealing with so much and they're losing so many important parts of the machine here. So, it's great they're 8-5. Let's hope it continues. They have 2 home games I think are very winnable here, and then they have a road game in Houston against a team that seems vulnerable right now. And then you never know what happens week 18 because that game might not even matter to the Bengals. So there's enough to be encouraged about, but also you need to be like, I understand the challenges these guys are up against, because right now those challenges are like every day of the week now, adding up further and further. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got every reason to be happy if something good happens, and if something bad happens, it's like, well, this is just the price, right? Like this is
Yeah.
just the price that you're paying right now because of the injuries. Um, Speaking of something good and everything else like that, let's talk about Joe Flacco, who's been a nice surprise, right? I forget that he was a Kubiak system guy in
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore. Like I forgot about that whole era of Gary Kubiak, of him in Baltimore. Um, and he seems to have come in here and really just have a pretty good understanding of what Kev wants to do in that base offense, and being able to take advantage of that, and also being a veteran player enough to kind of know where the layups are going to be. Right. Like if they bust the coverage, and he's been really good at this. I think you look at all 5 of his touchdowns, guys have been wide open. Right. And some of that's luck. Some of that's just knowing where your eyes should be, because we've seen it where sometimes during Baker Mayfield in 2021, you would have those opportunities and the eyes just wouldn't be in the right place. So he's done a great job of doing that. What have you seen from your view of Joe Flacco, of what he's bringing to this, and what do you think it kind of says about where we are with this offense and other things with this team?
I think he's been about what I anticipated when I looked at his Jets film. He is the arm's still alive. I still think he processes well enough. If the blitz stuff creates chaos for him, he will have moments of I don't want to get hit, right? So he'll have those moments of he tries to be anticipation and like a beat or two before he needs to be
Mm-hmm.
anticipatory, and that leads to some mistakes at times. We saw that in the interception against the Rams in the fourth quarter. We saw that on the slant flat botch situation where he had a free rusher coming at him, and tried to anticipate the slant was going to be open, but if you would have just literally held on to it a split second longer to let those mesh spots sort itself out, Amari Cooper, the slant flat, like the flat from Cooper was wide open because his man collisioned the slant. So like, I think he's comfortable, to backtrack to what you said. He's comfortable in the West Coast stuff that Kevin brings. So a lot of Kevin's under center and shotgun stuff is rooted in West Coast principle, timing, regimented, football out, get the ball space horizontally and then try to stretch vertically off of your horizontal stretches. So he's good enough at that stuff. He's got a rooted background in that stuff. And then he's got some pretty clear understanding of Kubiak's wide zone play action concepts and what that looks like. Also is under center play action concepts, both play action and run action. Those are different things. Play action obviously being when it's just the quarterback and running back faking, and then run action when everybody's committed to the run bit and you throw off of that. So he's just done a lot of those things, so it's not foreign to him. It's not like he's coming in running a lot of pistol, doing a bunch of different things than he's been accustomed to running, because he was not only with Kubiak, but he was with Rich Scangrello and Scangrello in Denver, which is a Shanny Tree disciple, and then McDaniel over there with the Jets is obviously also in that same tree of Shanahan stuff. So there's at least a mold of recent familiarity with how those offenses are run. So what have I seen collectively? Arm is live, not afraid to throw it downfield, not afraid to rip it into some challenging windows at times. He can still do it. I think that we would say that there's been a little bit of internal clock stuff that's gone on. He's missed some of those throws, like I mentioned, the decision anticipation, but there's also been moments of like, okay, I feel like I've been in the pocket a little bit too long, haven't thrown it. I see somebody open, but I short arm it. There were a couple short arm throws to David Bell, ironically, one of which was in the first half on a 3rd and 1 right before halftime. He left the exact same concept. They ended up hitting a touchdown in the second half. He left that ball short, and then there was a 3rd down late in the 4th quarter when they were trying to put the game away. He missed him on just a speed out on the left side. He kind of saw him late and then left it short. So is he he knows he's dealing with the tackle situation, right? He's not, that doesn't miss him. So he thinks he's got to be sped up a lot. And I think as he gets more comfortable operating within not just the system and the confines of what Kevin wants him to do, but also like game speed again, because he took almost a year off from playing and he wasn't in any camps. He wasn't in any preseason. He wasn't involved in anything. He just has to keep getting out there and playing. So I think that I'm encouraged that Flacco could get even better. I do think there's a little bit of like, this guy's 38. He's due for a clunker at some point. I do think that's going to happen at some point. But I do also think there's a level of like him getting a little bit more comfortable with game speed again, getting a little bit more comfortable with Kevin, and them unlocking a little bit more. So there's a chance, Quincy, he continues to play at a pretty decent level like we've seen so far. I do think there's going to be a mixed in game or two of these 4 that are probably not going to go as we hope, but I think there's trust between him and Kevin. I think he's comfortable doing a lot of the under center straight drop stuff that Kevin couldn't do with Deshaun, because I think Deshaun is just not quite comfortable doing those things. So Kevin's reverted to a little bit of the things he's most comfortable with, and that's been able to unlock Joe in a decent way. And the pairing is kind of a more natural fit. I think there's a bigger discussion to be had in the offseason about tying Deshaun to Kevin and how they work that out to the better, unlocking several elements. But for now, I think it's at least with Joe in a place that has relative comfort for him and Kevin too. And I think that sometimes that under center stuff can alleviate your tackle depth issues and tackle drop stuff, so that they're not as put in as big a bind on 3rd and pass, right? Situations where tackles have to cut off the angles and shotgun, it gets a little trickier. So under center, you can kind of vary your drops between 3, 5, and 7, so that tackles have to rush from different angles. I think they're helping with that too. So it's been a good mixture. Both guys deserve credit for kind of finding a way to operate this thing pretty effectively, given what we know are the unique challenges that they're facing, both in personnel and obviously in the mental side of it too, right?
Yeah. Is there any concern that he's thrown almost 90 passes in 2 weeks at 38?
Well, there is. It's funny because when they brought him in, my like analysis of what went wrong with the Jets is like, they're trusting this 37-year-old dude to throw 40, 50 times a game. And I'm like, they're not going to do that. Well, what did they do the first 2 games? They had him throw 40 plus times. I'm like, all right, so I sound like an idiot. But I think there's no way Kevin wants to throw it 40 times a game. There's no way. But they're having a run game efficiency issue right now. I think
Mm,
that the way they're trying to run the football is not it's not giving them enough answers. And now they need to find those answers and they need to unlock it. But I'm sure you, like me, have watched, and they are really hurting themselves in the lateral run game right now. And I think some of the tendencies of which they're running the football teams are solving. So the Browns, when they went up 28-14, right? Like, or 21-7, it was right before Flacco fumbled. They should be able to run the football to kind of like, once it got 21-7 there, I'm like, all right, 11 minutes left third quarter. Can they start to push some long drives running the foot? They're not comfortable with it right now. Like, that's the thing. If they were comfortable
yes.
with how they're running the ball, I don't think they would be making Joe throw as much as they are. But there's no doubt that they're struggling in run game efficiency. And because of the struggles in run game efficiency, both from design and performance, the players and the coaches are heavily involved in that failure right now. They feel like the best way to move the football is throwing the football quickly, getting it out of the quarterback's hands, and tying, even though the run game's not good, tying into your play action stuff to at least hold down linebackers and stuff and create some passing windows. So they definitely need, listen, if they're going to win two or three of these ball games coming up, they have to be a better run team. They cannot continue to trot Joe out there and throw him 40 times a game and just expect the results to be positive every week. There's going to be a lapse or two in there. So the hope here is that they can find a little more neutral game flow, but I also don't mind them at times, sort of leaning into that. Teams think we run the ball a ton and being able to mix up some of your opportunities off of that. But again, I don't think a solid formula for the last four games here is having Joe be over 40 attempts every Sunday here. So hopefully they can flip the script and get him down into the mid low 30s, or even the high 20s would be a great outcome, because that means you're being pretty efficient. You know what I mean? But I also want to be clear that when you throw it short a lot, that means your attempts are going to drive up, right? Because
Hmm.
you're an extension
You're
of the
trying to
run
get
game
5 yards
times.
on first
Yes.
down, basically through like stick or something like that, right? You're just gonna
Yes.
is basically the short yardage game is also the pass game,
It's an
instead of it just
extension
being
of the
like an
run
extension
game,
of
as they
attempts.
call it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, for sure.
So it's something interesting here. You mentioned there's a possibility that Joe Flacco does give us a clunker. Do you think that in case of that, are they going to be so kind of high strung here that they're going to go back to DTR if they feel like, oh, okay, we used him too much. He might be fatigued a little bit. And to that point, even if they do put in DTR, at this point, with the level of attrition that you're going through on this offense, is there even anything useful you can learn by putting DTR out there? Because I think that's some of the motivation for people wanting DTR out there is, hey, you can learn something, right? Maybe figure out what you have in this rookie. But like, is there really like, would you feel good about the information you would get from him? Like, I'm pretty sure there are some things you just learn by him just playing, right? Like, okay, operation stuff. But that's also another thing that I'm like, if it comes down to it and he does have to play, what do we really learn from him getting out there? Or what does his staff, more importantly, learn from him getting out there if that happens?
I think the only way you're going to see him get out there is if Joe just has a couple game drop off. Like, I think that Flacco came in and is a little better than they anticipated, is a little more up to speed than they anticipated, and is playing a little better than they hoped for, considering all of the things that were working against him. So I would say I don't expect Dorian to start unless Joe is pretty bad and they lose a couple games, right? Because it's the same theory with PJ Walker. It's kind of hard to bench PJ Walker, even when he's been bad, when they're winning ball games, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the vibes and all of that stuff around. Even though he might deserve that, you still, like, you're winning games, and a guy, if he's winning games, it's hard to say, hey man, we're actually going to go to somebody else, because there's a stigma that comes with that. I don't think that there's an expectation, especially how quickly Kevin kind of after the game, which is not very in character for him, named Joe the starter for the rest of the year. I think
Yeah.
that they believe in the process they have with Joe, that the marriage of Kevin and Joe and kind of their vision of how offense works is pretty aligned. There is clearly still a desire to keep Dorian a part of the game plan and make him feel as ready to go on Sundays as possible. We saw those packages where he came in. I think they could expand on that. I think it might happen even more than people are comfortable with, because every time these things happen, they start to label Kevin as what's the thing that they say, getting cute or gadgety, right? I
Oh,
think
getting
that
too
there's
cute.
yeah,
Well,
I
and to
love
be
that
honest
phrase.
though, like with this run game, part of the reason that you kind of stink right now is because you had so many injuries on the offensive line. And if you want the Browns to run the ball, they're gonna have to get cute with it. You can't just straight up run this thing with Jerome Ford 30 times and expect great results. Like you're gonna have to throw in some DTR, maybe have him have some options just to throw off the linebackers a little bit, have the threat that somebody's gonna pull the ball out. Like you're gonna have to do some stuff with him. Like he's still a really good athlete, and you can use him like that. And then when you're struggling to run the ball, I see no reason for him not to be a part of that.
No, he will. They'll come in and put him in and do a bunch of different stuff. I mean, I expect him to play 4 or 5 plays a game in some of those either short yardage or just maybe a neutral down where they want to get a little run game wrinkle. He's not going to be ignored. I don't think they want him to feel ignored, and I think that there's probably a little bit of guilt about, hey, he was playing his best football and then got hurt, and that stinks. But I think they also feel like tying themselves to Flacco for the rest of this year is a smart idea until it's not, right? Like you're going to ride the wave of this guy playing pretty well and just the fit that is pretty natural here. And we don't want to sort of disrupt that in any way, even though they clearly do have a desire to see what DTR is and keep developing him. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that they go back to him again unless they maybe lose to the Bears and then lose to the Texans, and Joe's ugly in both of those. Maybe you say like, all right, now we're 8-7 and we've had 2 straight bad performances. Now we got to go this Thursday night game against the Jets. Should we swap out and try to give the Jets a different look? Like, I don't even want to go down that path because that's pretty negative, but I think that's the type of thing that would, the only type of thing at this point that would force a situation like that. Like, I just think Joe would have to be bad. They'd
Yeah.
have to also, on top of that, lose multiple games in a row. So I think
Yeah.
I think Dorian's a part of what they want to do as far as keeping him active, but I don't think there's an idea of like, let's rotate back to him.
I don't even think it can necessarily be something like where he plays bad, right? The fact is, we haven't had a quarterback play 4 straight weeks, like on
Yeah.
this team all year. Joe Flacco is 38. Like, there is a possibility that there could be something that pops up during the game where he might have to miss a game, right? And you'd have to
Oh
throw
yeah.
Dorian out there. And then I guess one of the questions I'm asking is, in that situation, given everything, is that a spot where you can be like, hey, whatever he throws out there, we're really learning a lot from whatever he gives us? Or is it kind of a situation where we got to treat it like Baltimore, where it's like, this is just a disaster, right?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
at any moment Joe could have like arthritis or something. You never know, man. So you
yeah,
got to be clued in. No, I mean, yeah, it's hard to think that we're going to learn a ton more about Dorian the rest of the way. I think he'll just be in survival mode if he does get put out there, because again, it's he's a different stylistic quarterback to Joe. So I think that there's certainly stuff that he benefits from working through a game plan and being part of the decision making for what he's most comfortable with. Hence why I think we saw the best version of him in that Pittsburgh and then into the as he calmed down and played well later in the game, and then obviously what he was able to do in Denver. But no, I don't think we're going to get any definitive answers on Dorian if he's thrust in there the rest of the way, or like in these mid-gamed into something because something happened. So I think that it's been a great learning year for Dorian, but I don't think any definitive stuff's going to come out of this whole operation for him.